begin, you need to cast on 2 stitches. So there you go, however you want to cast on your 2 stitches. I just did a long tail cast on, but just whatever you need to do to cast on 2 stitches. Make sure you leave yourself a tail that's at least 10 inches long, because the tail is going to be worked into the tassels, so you want to make sure you have enough. Mine is obviously a little longer than 10 inches, which is totally fine. So you start off with your cast on 2, and you can do this on straight needles or on circulars, whatever floats your boat. We are going to knit front and back and then knit 1. So we knit front and then we knit back and then we knit 1. That's it. Now row 2 and the rest of the rows for our increase section, we knit front and back of the first stitch and then just knit across. So that is row 2. We knit front and back and then knit across for row 2. Now we're going to keep on doing that knit front, knit back of the first stitch, knit front and back on the first stitch, and then knit across. We're going to keep doing that until we have the number of stitches called for in the pattern or the desired length of the small side. So just keep on doing that row over and over again for your increase section. Once you have your increase section so that you are at the length you want your shorter side, so if this, which is about 2 inches, is the length you wanted your shorter side, then this would be where we're going to start our straight section. So once you have your increase section done, we start our straight section. So the straight section is actually a 2-row repeat. The first row we're going to decrease on one side, so we're going to knit 2 together. You just go underneath 2 stitches and knit them together. Ooh, looks like I caught some of that. Let me try that again. It's a little harder with so many strands, but that's fine. There we go. Knit 2 together and then knit across. This is our decrease row. And then after this, we'll have our increase row. So here was our decrease row. You can see that we've already started to come up on this side. Now next we do an increase row. So the increase row is the same as we had been doing in the increase section. We knit front and back, and then we just knit across. So there is our increase row. This row continues to go up and get longer on this side, and this row also now is going straight up. So now we're going to continue making our decrease row and our increase row back and forth until the long end of our piece is the length we want. Once the long side of your piece is the length that you want, you're ready to do your decrease section. So for your decrease section, you are going to knit 2 together, and then knit to the end. And that is the row that you're going to keep doing over and over again. Okay, so that one didn't really make much of a difference, right? Because we were already on a decrease row anyway, but the next one will. All right. So now we're going to turn. And now we're going to knit 2 together again. Okay, so this row is also starting now with a knit 2 together. And then we're going to knit to the end. So there you can see that now, instead of going up, this side has started going this way. And since this side was already going this way, they are going to join. So we're going to keep repeating that row until we're down to just 2 stitches. Here you see we have just 3 stitches left. So we're still doing knit 2 together, knit to the end. So we're knitting 2 together. I keep splitting that yarn. There we go. Knit 2 together, knit to the end, which is just 1 stitch left. Now we're down to just 2 stitches. So I am just going to knit 2 together. That's all. Now you're just going to cut your yarn, leaving at least 10 inches, and then just pull it through, and you'll have your completed scarf with at least a 10-inch end on each end, a 10-inch yarn end on the cast on and the bind off. And that way you'll be ready to add on to your tassels. It is time to make these fun little knotted tassels on the end of this scarf. So what I have is a whole bunch of yarn that I've cut to about 2 feet long, which is significantly longer than I need, but when I cut it I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do with it. Probably 1.5 feet is enough, but you know, it's always nice to be safe. So 18 to 24 inches is good. And I'm going to take, I have 4 different colors here, and I'm just going to take 1 piece of each color. Okay, just maybe slide this over a little bit to get it out of our way. Put our little stack of yarn over here, and now get this so we can work on it. All right, I have 1 piece of each color, and I'm finding the center, and I'm just going into, you see how if you give the bottom of the scarf a little tug, there are these bumps, and then there are these lines in between each of the bumps. I'm going to go down through where the lines are, in between the bumps. All right, grab all of those loops, pull them through, and then pull all the yarn through that loop. Okay, and then just keep doing that. 1 piece of each color. Find the middle, go down through where that straight across piece is, pull the yarn through, and then pull all the ends through that loop. All right, keep doing that so you have them all done, including one that you're going to put right here. I've got all of these fringes tied on here, and of course you can just have fringe that way, but I'm going to make this fun little knotty area. So I'm taking the 4 ends from, it was either my cast on or my bind off, I believe it was my cast on, and I'm taking 4 ends from the next bundle. When we made a tassel, we ended up with 8 pieces of yarn coming off from each tassel because it was 4 and we folded it in half, right? So I'm just taking half of them, 1 of each color, and attaching them to the 4 pieces from my cast on. And I'm just tying an overhand knot and pulling it up pretty much as tight as I can get it, as high as I can get it. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfectly touching. You actually don't want it to be like totally smushed up there, but I just pull it up as high as I can get it, and then give it a tiny little tug in the other direction, tug down. So you see I'm going up as high as I can. I have the 2 that were left from this one, and 4 that were left from this one, and 4 from this one. And now tying it up, pulling it up towards the top, and then giving it a little tug. Okay, that one probably could be a little closer. Now I have the 4 left from this tassel, and I'm taking 4 from this tassel. I'm making an overhand knot, trying to tighten it up right up against everything, give it a pull, and then if it's a little too close to the top, I can give it another pull down. All right, so that's about as far away as I want each of them, and I'm going to do that all the way across. When I'm done, there'll be 4 pieces coming off of this one that aren't attached to anything. But I'm just going to keep on taking the 4 left from the last one I did with 4 more from the one next to it and tying them up all the way across until I just have 4 strands left. I've finished that first row of knots, and now I'm going to work back in the other direction. So I have these 4 strands of yarn hanging off the end that haven't been attached to anything, and then I'm taking 4 more strands from the bunch next to it, tying an overhand knot right up close to where the last knot was. Okay, then I'm taking the 4 left over from the last tassel, the last knot, and 4 from the next knot, tying an overhand knot right up against the last set. Give it a little pull. So again, you have about 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch of yarn in between the sets of knots. Okay, so let's do that again. I have 4 pieces of yarn left over, and I'm grabbing 4 pieces of yarn from the next knot, overhand knot, pull it all the way up to those knots, and then give it a little tug to get it down to about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, I'm going to keep doing that all the way across, and again at the very end of this I'll have those 4 strands of yarn left over on this end this time. The first, third, and 5th row of knots are all exactly the same. We have these sets of 8 pieces of yarn coming off from the tassels, and then these 4 pieces that were either the cast on or the bind off end, depending on which one you're using. So we are now going to take the 4 pieces from the cast on end and then 4 pieces of the next tassel, and we're going to tie them together in an overhand knot and push that up. Give it a little pull. So there's about 1/4 of an inch of yarn between the previous knot or the bottom of the scarf to this knot. So there's about 1/4 of an inch of straight yarn in between knots. Now I'm taking the 4 pieces of yarn left over from this tassel and 4 more pieces of yarn from the next tassel. I'm doing that again, overhand knot, pull it up really close, give it a tug, make it so that there's about 1/4 of an inch in between the knots. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to keep doing that all the way across. When I get to the other end, there will be 4 extra pieces of yarn coming off from this tassel. Okay, and then we're just going to turn around and do it the same way in the other direction. We finished row 3 of the knots, and rows 2 and 4 are worked exactly the same way, and they're actually worked the same way as rows 1, 3, and 5 are, just in the opposite direction. So now I have these 4 pieces of leftover yarn, and I'm going to grab 4 pieces of yarn from this tassel on this end and tie them together with an overhand knot. Okay, giving about 1/4 of an inch between the knots, and then I'm taking the other 4 pieces of yarn from this tassel, 4 pieces of yarn from this tassel, and again making an overhand knot, and I'm going to keep doing that all the way back to the other end, and again when I'm done there'll be 4 pieces of yarn left over on this end, and then I'm going to work back, and you keep doing that back and forth for as many rows of knots as you want. I started off with about 24 inches of yarn. I'm going to do 5 sets of knots, and then I'm going to clip it to about 2 inches of tassel from the bottom of the very bottom row of knots. I've finished my 5 rows of knots here, and so now I'm just going to try to get everything kind of flattened out and put this 2-inch wide ruler across it all. Okay, and now you can cutting them. So my tassels are just about 2 inches long from the last set of knots. All right, there we go. So now we have these fun little knotted tassels at the end of our scarf, at both ends of our scarf.